All right, something new. We're introducing my very first guest, Samantha Mixan. Otherwise known as Elemental Dancer, she's a performance artist for over a decade. She's performed on stages all around the world. She embodies the elements, and her dances are captivating. Welcome, Samantha Mixan.
Thank you, Ken. It's so good to be here. It's so good to see you.
Something to note between me and Samantha is we actually started our careers together in the circus arts over a decade ago.
Yeah.
It's been quite a while.
It's been a long time. Ken is actually my teacher of one of the things that I do, fire dancing. Ken taught me how to do that. So I consider him my sensei.
Oh, you're a very good student.
Thank you.
and now you've taken that art and you've expanded it so much, and you've worked with a professional company, and you no longer live in Omaha. You've been able to take this as a full-time career.
Yes, I live in Miami now, and I love it. My art has taken me from Omaha to Kansas City. And when we were in Kansas City, we were traveling to all of these other places here in the United States and around the world. Did a lot of travel during that time. And then Quixotic, the company that we both love and work for, transferred me to Miami to work in a residency show there. And I've been there for 6 years.
How many performances would you guess you've done so far in your life?
I wonder if by now we would be 8,888. I think we're nearing 10,000. Is that too much? Did I overguess that?
Well, if we take 8,888 and divide it by 365, which is days in a year.
Okay, let's do the math.
Let's actually do that math. 365. That's 24 years if you performed every day.
Okay, so if I performed every day?
If you performed every day, that would be 24 years straight.
Oh, I have done some performances 2 a day.
That's true.
And I've been a performance artist since 2010. So that's 14 years. Going to the grocery store is also a performance in some ways.
No, please explain. I want to hear this.
As they say, the world is a stage. I think we could probably count some other things in there to get to 8,888.
I think so too. What are some other examples that you think would work out well for this so we can get 24 years worth in?
Can we count rehearsals?
Absolutely.
Okay, if we're counting rehearsals and training.
Visiting family and driving in your car, I think, just if your hand, the way that it goes outside when you're...
The way that it flows in the wind outside the window.
Exactly.
I'm, basically the main character in my own movie.
This actually does lead to a good question, though, which is like, performance is your life, right? Can we say that or not?
Yes.
Yes?
I would say that my art and my identity are intrinsically linked. And I sometimes wonder if that is a fallacy or not. Because if for some reason I can't do my art, does that make me less of me? Or if my art is not received, do I take that personally and then am offended because I believe it's against my personal character of who I am? So I've been trying to glean and separate my identity from my art.
Let's say Sammy never picked up the hula hoops. What do you think she would be doing right now?
She would be talking to people in a therapeutic setting, probably.
Therapy?
Yeah, I studied psychology at school, and I went to college for psychology and then graduated with my degree, a bachelor's of arts in psychology.
So if you weren't performing, you'd be in psychology, you'd be doing some forms of therapy.
Yeah, I probably would have kept going with school and done some form of psychotherapy.
Do you think that there's a connection between these two paths? Like say the essence of what you put into your performing, do you think that would go into your therapy in the same way, or do you think that would unlock a different form of Sammy altogether?
I think that my philosophy around performing has been highly influenced by my study of psychology.
Really? How so?
Definitely. Well, when you study psychology, you're studying people, why people do what they do. You're studying the brain, how people react, perceive, the limits of consciousness. It's a wide subject. Part of the art is the audience and the reciprocation, the receiving of the art by the audience. So when I'm crafting a performance, I'm thinking I have the audience in mind as well. And I think I tend to analyze what they may receive from it so that I can craft my intention and my story to ultimately lead to a message that I would want them to receive.
How do you find the balance between what you think they might be expecting and what you feel as an artist you want to express?
I would prefer an audience with no expectations. I have had audience members perceive and identify themes in my art that I didn't know were there. So that means that they perceived something that was true and unique to them.
That's amazing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that means that they saw something and it reflected something that they saw in themselves, even though that wasn't even your original intention. It's kind of wild how art works that way, isn't it?
That is something that gives it a deep meaning. And if they perceived that and made their own story through the art, I feel like psychology has a play in this. And it can help you understand how your art is being received.
Would you say that that's one of the bigger rewards that you get from performing is how people perceive your performances?
Well, now that we've talked about it so much, Ken, I think we're touching on something. I think we're touching on it. Yeah. Part of what makes performing so great for me is being with the audience in the moment, in whatever capacity that is.
When you do a show, do you sometimes gauge the audience before you come out and change anything, depending on the energy that you're feeling from them? Or is it fairly consistent? Are you trying to give them a ride that you already have in your mind?
I do like to check out the audience and get on their wavelength. Wait and check and see where they're at.
What are some ways that you try to get into their wavelength? I'm assuming it's a mental preparation kind of thing, or a visualization, or how do you tap into that?
I go in the back and I look, and I'm in the back of the audience, and I look out and I read their body language and try to tap into the energy of the room.
That's amazing. What if you're doing a performance and you can't quite seem to gauge or read the audience? What is your default mode then?
There's an energy in the performance in which it's intended. Like if it's intended to be a blast of fiery intensity, then that is it. Or if it's meant to be a slow and intimate connection, then that is the intention. So I think there's always an intention before you go out.
Yeah.
It's just that I want to make that intention understood. And so if the audience is being, say, it's supposed to be a slow, very intimate connection, and the audience is wild and right. is out there, and you can tell that it's a party, then maybe I would change it and craft it to be a little bit bigger so that it can be read by
like
them.
on the fly?
On the fly. Or
nice.
Just changing something from inside.
So your presence radiates a different,
a bit bigger, maybe bigger in a bigger way, or toning it down depending on what it is.
When we're talking about that, what do you think is the ideal connection between a performer and their audience? What's the connection that you think is ideal?
I think an ideal connection between the audience and the performer is an audience who is ready to perceive and receive and support, and the performer is ready to express and give and reciprocate and inspire. So if both of those things are on point, then there will have been some connection between the audience and the performer.
Yeah, no, that's amazing.
I would think that would be the ideal scenario. Something where the music is well placed at the right volume and the lights are correct, shining in the right places, and the audience feels comfortable.
And then it just opens up like a wave,
then the
right?
magic happens.
Do you have anything that you can do, or what are some thoughts that you have if you feel that they're on the cusp of that, but they can't quite hit it? You know, there's audiences where they don't quite clap, or they're almost there, but they almost seem shy, or they can't get into it.
Just because the audience doesn't clap doesn't mean that they're not enjoying it. And that's something that I've had to realize. So just because the audience claps doesn't mean they're not receiving something or liking it. But if the audience is almost there and in the cusp of connecting, then I would want to bring them in to be with you. And in order to bring them in to be with you, it comes from inside, and it's also through the eyes.
Yeah.
So if you make eye contact with an audience member, you can bring them into the world to connect with you. Because sometimes they're on their phone.
It's true.
Sometimes they're talking to maybe the server, and they want
especially
some
nowadays
food.
with their phones. Like,
yeah, or
sometimes it's a compliment to have a phone. You know, it's a compliment to have the phone.
They're posting about it. It's fine.
Yeah.
But there is a way to captivate them and to bring them in, and it's hard to explain.
I do think that human connection is very important. How do you think that this art relates to daily life or real life, like outside of the performance realm? Do you find connections between those two, especially since you've studied psychology?
Between
the connection with the audience and then just connections in general with people?
I would say that there's a certain charisma that you can have on and off stage that can bridge between the two. Connections off stage can be even deeper because they're seeing a more raw form of yourself than something that you've intentionally polished and made for them. So I would say yes and no.
That's a good
Okay.
Yes and no.
Yes and no. Can we hold the capacity of both things at one time?
Yeah, well, I just find that there's just such a blur between these two avenues, but it's kind of hard to describe, isn't it? Well, what about what's a fun fact that most people probably don't know about your craft?
Performance artists, I think they tend to live to donate, to give their life to what they do. And so when an audience is seeing a dancer perform, that dancer has given a part of themselves to their craft that can never be taken. And I think that's really admirable. And so not always do I think that the audience understands, or what people understand about this form of work. To touch on what we talked about earlier, it is an identity, it is a lifestyle, and you give and give and give in order to be able to do it.
So you see performing as a means of giving, and as a means of giving, essentially. Serving?
Yes. And it's taken me a while to understand that there is purpose there. And there is meaning and purpose to what we do. It's not just shiny costumes on stage, even though we love that. There is a greater meaning and purpose behind what we do as performance artists and as movement artists that bring positivity and hope in sometimes a very chaotic and negative world.
That's true. That's a really good reflection. I think sometimes we'll go to a show when we're feeling good and we know it'll make us feel better, and then sometimes we go to a show because we need to raise our spirits, and that transformation is something else, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a great way to think about how we can serve. Do you think that that this idea of serving or giving has changed the way that you perform?
Absolutely. Once I realized that's that connection and how you can serve and give, then my work got much more intentional and has more substance and meaning behind it than superficiality of glamour and talent.
That makes sense. I think sometimes, like, we can watch a show and we can feel like people are moving, I don't want to say mechanically, but sometimes you can just feel the essence behind the movement of a performer just by their intentions that they put behind it. Kind of like when someone cooks food and they put extra care in cooking the food, it just kind of tastes better.
Yes.
So
yes,
that's just how I feel, but hell yeah.
Yes. Cooking with intention and love, even if it's not the best meal, you can still tell.
Sorry. I didn't mean to laugh. I'm just cooking.
Yeah, we're talking about Ken and cooking.
Oh my gosh. Right. Exactly.
But good thing he knows fire safety.
I mean, I know everything about fire. I just don't know about how to contain it very well when it comes to food.
When it comes to the stove.
I've burned myself more cooking than I have spitting fire.
That's a fun fact about you.
There's a fun fact about me.
That's a fun fact about Ken Hill.
Gnarly burns from just like grabbing the pot too early, things of that nature.
Yeah, where did you get that burn? I was trying to cook some pasta.
Oh my God. We won't even get in. Sammy, what do you love most about what you do as an artist? What is the thing that gets you up and drives you to be excited? So you first wake up, or did you?
Life is exciting and should be celebrated. So one of my core values is to live life with a passionate zest and ultimate zeal and just be expressive. And I've found in the past many years that that the well keeps overflowing.
That's a good problem to have.
So I'm just going to keep living passionately. And if I am not feeling that passionate that morning, I'll just put on some music and dance.
I think we should talk about lessons, because both me and you have done a lot of performing in our lives, and we have learned some things about planning and preparation and even just reliability for that matter. I guess I could start by just saying this one point, which is that I think that a person that shows up and that's reliable, in my eyes, beats someone that's more talented, but they're unreliable.
Always, because you know that you can trust that person. And when you're in a circus setting and you are sometimes relying on that person to hold your life, in the case of fire safety or rigging, aerial rigging,
absolutely,
you have to have trust there. And if they're not reliable and showing up, then the trust is moot.
When I think about like the things that I've learned, I feel like I've learned a lot of sensitivity. I think that that's really what's shifted in my life, is that as I learn more about my skills, I become more sensitive. So the little nuances start becoming bigger and bigger. And then I can actually like hone in on that and find balance within the more subtle details.
Subtlety.
Yeah, it's the subtleties that make all the difference. And then where I'm going with this is back in the old days when me and Sammy used to perform.
Oh boy, here we go. Memory lane is that Ken and I wouldn't practice as much as we should have, I think.
We were cocky a little. Well, not cocky. That's not the word. Lacked the sensitivity to understand the nuances of what a bigger production looks like. I mean, we had smaller productions, and so we just kind of freeformed it. And, it'd be kind of like a chef just going to the store and grabbing random ingredients. Be like, yeah, it'll make something good. It's all good. I'm a good cook.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest lessons was realizing that rehearsal, practice, and choreography is not just something extra that you need for the performance, but is inherently required to make something on a grander scale. Improving is so much fun. The expression that comes out of you ecstatically can be so potent and raw and incredible. And I think we relied on that too much because you're not always in a space to express ecstatically in that way.
Yeah.
So we would just assume we would be great.
Yep.
And then I would cry after the performance because it wasn't great. Lessons.
Yeah. No, yeah, we winged it. And back in the old days too, I would definitely have a lot more drops and mistakes because I wasn't prepared or practiced enough. So
rehearsals have become second nature. And rehearsals are so required for, I want to say, a top level detailed performance. And that took a long time to learn, especially when you're somewhat naturally expressive and talented. It's so easy to let that go by the wayside.
Just go wild with it. I mean,
I think people who work really hard for things like flexibility, strength, and tech and tricks and dance, like people who have to work really, really hard for those things that it doesn't come naturally to, end up being some of the best performers because they had to put in the time and effort to do so.
I heard Pierce Brosnan said something like, I'd be a better actor if I wasn't so damn good looking. So I think
if I wasn't so good at it, I'd be much better.
I guess to some degree, like if you can rely on it and it makes your life easy, then sometimes it can be a crutch. Well, let's talk about mistakes. Let's talk about disasters. Let's talk about how
disasters.
Yes, because those are always fun. Because I think a lot of times people don't start stuff because they're afraid of how to handle things when they go wrong because of expectations or whatever. How did old Sammy handle mistakes? We'll start with that.
Crying.
That was really easy.
She would cry and vow to make it better.
I've never had any of those phone calls before.
Bringing up old wounds. I have a funny one. Is that that's the phone call that I'm thinking about was an hour long and in the Quixotic parking lot. Is that the one you're thinking of?
When you had a unicorn bump on your head?
Yeah. So like you said, we were a bit coggy when we started, which is...
we were, yeah.
How wrong were we? But I, had this idea that I could do sear wheel. So this incredible sear wheel artist was teaching me some sear wheel after a big rehearsal.
And just for those that don't know, a sear wheel is a giant, almost 6-foot wheel that you stand in and you roll around like a
It's
quarter.
a hula hoop, right?
It's a giant hula hoop.
No, it's not.
Stand in.
It's not. And it was before my very first really big Quixotic show. So there was no reason that I should have been practicing on this wheel. And I ended up completely falling so hard onto the ground, and the wheel came up and like bapped my forehead so hard that I had a huge bump that was ginormous on my face right before the performance. And it was obviously in front of everyone because there was only one big room back then. It was one giant open space office / training / performance area. So everyone saw it. It made a huge noise. I was extremely embarrassed. And then they got me a bag of peas to put on my forehead as I lay on the couch. First time at Quixotic, first time meeting everyone, and I had this ginormous bruise.
Those were good times.
That was embarrassing. So I went out into the parking lot and called you crying, thinking that they were going to replace me. But the next day, the makeup artist really helped me by covering it up.
Yeah, the makeup artist.
Makeup artist covered it up, put a little hat on me, and I went out and performed anyway.
What do you think is the big lesson here. Oh yeah.
I think don't take unnecessary risks the night before big performances. You really have to hone in, get good sleep. Again, we've talked a lot about preparation, but prepare well. And also just be more humble. Be more humble with your skill set. And also just don't get embarrassed too much, because I don't think a lot of people remember that unless I remind them of it.
No, not at all. I mean, I definitely think that we watch ourselves harder than anyone by a lot. And the standard that we hold against ourselves can ultimately define if we succeed or fail, especially if you're really hard on yourself.
I am really hard on myself.
How do you get through it when you are?
Especially for many of the first years performing, maybe the first 6 or 7, I was so hard on myself because I knew that I could be better than I was, and I wasn't there yet, and I was so frustrated with that aspect. And
what got you through it when you were feeling that way? I think a lot of people, this is where people quit. I love talking about this part because this is where a lot of people quit, is when they start feeling the pressure, and this is the defining moment. What kept you in the game?
There was a realization that we need to treat ourselves as though we would treat a friend and not be a critic to your own self, but to accept yourself. Self-acceptance. There was a realization of self-acceptance and a gentleness that I needed to treat myself with that I began to cultivate.
I was smiling because that was in my last podcast. I was talking about treating yourself like your friend.
Yes.
So
treating yourself like a friend. One thing that has stuck with me that I'd like to bring up now is a concept called your level best. And the person that taught me to this is no longer with us, but his name is Sujit Kayal, and he was my mentor when I did my first hula hoop traveling gig in India.
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember that?
Yeah.
2011?
That was a while ago, yeah.
2011, I went to India, 3 months.
Yeah.
Life-changing experience, because that's when I realized I really wanted to be a performance artist and pursue it professionally. I was in my last year of college. And Sujit said, as long as you give your level best for that day, I will be happy with the performance, even if it wasn't perfect. And it's kind of the concept of meeting yourself where you're at. So you're understanding that you may be really stressed out that day, running on a little less sleep, or maybe you're actually run down and sick, but you still have to perform or something along those lines. But if you give the best you can do that day, and you've given your best, your level best, wherever that is, it may not be you at 110%, but it's meeting yourself where you're at that day and then striving to do the best you can and then accepting that.
That's amazing.
So
that's
the
fantastic.
level best. It doesn't have to be perfect.
The level best. So if you're feeling 40%, then the idea of being 100% was like, there's this time I dislocated my shoulder and I shouldn't assume that I could be as good on that particular moment.
But when you were able to begin lifting it again, and then you were able to use it barely, I feel like you were able to accept that part of yourself and be like, that was my level best. I could lift it up to here.
Yes.
And you would always be excited. You'd be like, Sammy, I can lift my arm.
I remember, yeah.
I can lift my arm all the way up to here. I can't go any farther, but this is my best I can do now.
Yeah, just for people that don't know, like I dislocated my shoulder and it froze for almost a year. It took me a year to be able to lift my arm all the way back up to the top. So like even reaching the bottom of my steering wheel took a lot of time. It took a lot of time even just to reach the bottom of my steering wheel. I just like, I made it.
it.
And actually, I started learning the steer wheel when my shoulder was still healing, and I was using it to try to stretch it out. So that's really interesting to think about, though. Like level best. Keep that in mind, ladies and gentlemen. Level best. So you're having an off day. You can't judge yourself by your best day, because this is something that I used to do too, which is I would have this amazing training session at home, and then I'd go to a performance with the same expectation that I would be the same way at home. And then it would create stress, and then I'd throw my prop in the crowd. I'd drop it.
Hit the camera, man.
Oh. Anyways, on that note,
well, when you're doing a show every day too, with this residency show, you do not feel as energized for each show. Each show is not the exact same amount of energy and the exact same circumstances of the day. And you're doing the same show, so it's easy to get a gauge of where you're at. Sometimes some acts are really, really good and some are really bad. And kind of in a way, I keep this graph maybe in my head, like I'm tallying my performance a bit.
Like before you perform, are you like, I'm feeling energy's a 7 in my, like, what's that graph look like?
Yeah, the graph, it's like, okay, this one was good, that one wasn't so good, I messed up here, and I'm just kind of like tallying those things as I go along. But when you are in work-life balance and in finding that balance, if you're injured and you can't give 100% on that leg, for example, if your leg is injured, and if you keep giving 100% on that leg, you will just get more and more injured.
Oof.
And so it's
Facts.
it's important to know where you're at so that you can give the right amount of energy to your performance. You need to allocate yourself.
I love that. I also feel like that relates to life a little bit too. Like if you're having an off day and you're just trying to get through your daily routine or your daily chores, just having an understanding of where you are emotionally or physically maybe you should change up some of the habits that you're doing on that day just because it's not the right time for what you thought you need to do, And
that plays into boundaries, which is also really good for work-life balance, is finding your boundaries between this is where the performance stuff ends and this is where my personal life is, and this is where they intersect. But also having boundaries within yourself to say no to projects that you're too overwhelmed to do, or to say no to friend activities that you know that you need self-care and rest.
How do you, because I find that this is a challenge for me, is how do you find balance in that
between work and life?
Yeah, between deciding like, okay, this is where I need to draw a boundary, this is the time I need to draw it. How do you decide that in your mind? Because for me, like I could chug away on writing like software on my computer, and then all of a sudden it's like 2 a.m. and I'm like completely drained, but I haven't been listening. Like I'm almost out of touch because I'm in the flow state so hard that I just lose touch with reality for a moment. But then I realize I've way overstepped my boundaries. How do you do it?
I think that it's not in the mind, but the body. And so listening to your body may help you, because you're someone who is in their mind a lot. And when you're in your flow state, like programming, for example, it's a lot of mental activity in mind. And it kind of overrides the signals of your body saying, I'm tired, I need water, I need sleep, food. And so connecting with your body and being in your body can help you decide where those lines and boundaries are. So
say you're hitting a boundary. Where do you feel like a twinge in your stomach? Do you feel it in your chest? Is it in your shoulders?
Yeah, it could be in any of those categories depending on what you're doing. I feel a lot of tension in my face that can tend, like I'm holding my thighs, like I can really accidentally, they're clench, so tense. Like clench them. And so there are places that I can tune into and realize that they're holding tension. And in that way, maybe I should take a break from whatever I'm thinking about or from whatever I'm doing at this moment. Because as artists, we totally can get wrapped up in whatever we're doing.
All right. We're getting close to wrapping things up. Now, you can go back in time 30 years when you first started performing, right?
30 years
Kidding.
ago.
Okay. 15 years, 14, 13, right before you reached the point where you realized you wanted to be a performer, you can go back right now as you are to your old Sammy self, and you could give her one solid piece of advice that you think would help her the most. What would you give her?
I would tell her to be relentless and keep going.
Be relentless.
Don't quit.
That's a good one.
Have ambition. And I would tell her that she's protected and going to be okay.
And she was.
And here she is.
There she is right now. She made it.
Woohoo!
Next question. Do you have a big dream in the next, 10 years that you'd like to accomplish? Something you haven't done yet that you really want to? The crescendo of your career.
Crescendo of my career?
Yep.
I would like to direct something. I would like to be in a director's seat of some capacity. But also, I'd like to do things that are outside of my career as well.
Like what?
Like be a mom.
Oh, nice.
Like be a mom and start a family. Those things are really important to me. And they're not involved with the dancing career, but I believe that I would be able to do my art for the rest of my life, and it will be part of my life in some capacity.
Well, I can vouch that you can definitely have a kid and balance it, because I already raised one. So
I know so many parents that are also performers, and it's so inspiring to see them and the way that they have a completely new work-life balance.
And the way I always saw it too is like, if I ever gave up my dream for my kids, then my kids would see me giving up my dream for them. But in this way, my son got to see me have both. Follow through on what I'm passionate about while still raising him in a good way.
And he's so inspired by you.
Yeah.
Because he does things like you now too.
Now it drives him.
Yeah.
Like it just goes on and on. It's fantastic. Is there anything that you're doing even online or hobbies or anything at all that your fans or people that know you or people that want to know you better can look forward to in the future?
Well, I got a sewing machine for Christmas.
Nice.
So I'm going to be sewing a lot more next year. And that means creating costumes that only exist in my mind and that don't exist yet in reality. You cannot buy these things. So I'm going to be working on crafting costumes. I really like fire wearables. So I'm going to keep going in that direction. Fire that you can wear on your body.
So you're learning crafting so you can build these elaborate
looks and costumes.
I think to be costumes you can actually light on fire.
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. I've already gone into making my own fire props, which was a huge step, and I suggest it for fire dancers and fire performers.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So now that I've done that, I'm realizing that everything can be a fire prop.
Well, I don't know anything about that, but no. I think
at least once.
I think that exploration would be really good.
Bringing something from the ether that only has existed in your mind and then birthing that project into physicality and reality, it's something that I'd like to continue to do more of.
That's a lot like my technology, by the way.
Yes.
Because as I run my own entertainment company and I program my own technology with it, I can have a vision knowing the bounds of that technology. And in the same way, I think that if you can start designing costumes, you can incorporate that in how you direct things, and it'll be even more fine-tuned, really sunk in, That's awesome.
You're doing things that I've never seen before.
Well, thank you. I try. It's hard to try to innovate sometimes. It is the challenge. Most of it does not work. It's say like a 10% chance, but those 10%, gold. They're good.
Yeah. Do it for the 10%.
With that said, how can people find you? Where are you online where they can follow your adventures?
I mostly am on Instagram. I like that platform, and you can find me there at Elemental Dancer.
All
one word, Elemental Dancer. I'm also on TikTok. I'm looking forward to maybe getting my website up and running next year.
All right. And that wraps it up. Hey, Sammy, again, thank you so much for coming down. Very first guest for Sleepless Dream, and we really appreciate having you down here.
Thank you. It's such an honor, and we have the best conversations. So
Absolutely.
thank you so much for taking the time to do this with me today.
All right. And with that said,
goodbye. We love you.
Thanks again for listening. Please subscribe so we can update you with future podcasts about creativity, artists, and more. We'd really appreciate a review or a rating so other people know about this too. And if you'd like to email comments, questions, or suggestions, you can reach me at thesleeplessdreampodcast@gmail.com. Or if you just want more information, visit us, thesleeplessdream.com.